Welcome to NightMerica, a podcast that takes you on a tour of the abnormal, paranormal, weirdly true, and truly weird in every corner across this nation because, to paraphrase Ray Parker Jr., whether it's ghosts, aliens, monsters, or monstrous humans, there's something strange in your neighborhoods. I'm Aaron Sagers. I'm one half of the co-hosting duo of NightMerica, and Britt.
Hello, joining you from across the country.
Yes, I feel like Ray Parker Jr. is sort of our de facto third co-host because we do give him credit and love every episode.
Yep, yet still have never seen Ghostbusters.
Right. Have you heard the entirety of the song? Have you watched the music video of the Who You Gonna Call Ghostbusters theme song?
Nope, not at all.
It's like a time capsule from the 80s. It's is like a lot of cameos by various 80s personalities randomly showing up in the video. And it's such a moment in time. And also, I don't know if we've talked about this before, but did we talk about Ron Jeremy at the end of Ghostbusters?
No. Ron Jeremy like the porn star or Ron Jeremy like the anchorman?
No. That's Ron Burgundy. But Ron Jeremy, the adult film star, also known as the Hedgehog, he...
What? Why?
Probably because he's short and hairy and, I don't know, and prickly.
You want to keep going with that description?
I've met Ron Jeremy, and he sent me a bottle of rum once, Rhonda Jeremy, which I still have. I still have a bottle of Ron Jeremy's rum. But... he was in the final scene of Ghostbusters. I won't spoil it for you, Britt, since you haven't seen it. But there is a scene at the end of Ghostbusters, a crowd scene, and Ron Jeremy is in it. And that was before he was Ron Jeremy.
Who was he then?
Well, he was still Ron Jeremy, but maybe before he was the Hedgehog. It was like before Bruce Wayne becomes Batman.
Got it.
It's before anyhow.
Got it.
So yeah, Ray Parker Jr. So, anyhow... I don't know how we really got off on that tangent, but anyhow.
How does anyone get off on any tangent?
How does anyone get off on a Ron Jeremy tangent? That's a whole loaded conversation, it seems like. So this week, our topic is beaches. We're going to talk about some weird happenings at various beaches, but I think before we get into that, I'm curious, what beaches did you grow up on? Which beaches do you have like a fondness for? Were they Chicago beaches, French beaches, having grown up in France?
French beaches for sure. My most favorite beach would be going to the Monaco coastline because it's not sand, it's all sea glass. So as a kid, you'd be wandering, and it almost felt like this magical world because you'd see all these blue, turquoise, gray, green sea glass, and of course everyone would collect them. So that always was my kind of highlight of beaches. And then coming to the States, having family in Florida and California, we would go see each of those kind of sandy coastlines, and of course I love them. They're so much more comfortable to walk on than the sea glass beaches, but I just think there's something so gorgeous and serene about like the colorful sea glass. I mean, you were like grew up all around beaches, so you probably have a ton of favorite beaches.
I don't know about a ton. Well, actually, my favorite beaches in the whole world are not in Florida where I grew up. But yes, I did grow up around... I mean, Florida is a peninsula, after all, surrounded on three sides by water. For those of you that don't know your peninsulas from your archipelago. But yeah, I grew up around a lot of beaches. And I have a fondness for things like Cocoa Beach or even Daytona Beach, which is not a great beach, or New Smyrna Beach. But honestly, my favorite beaches are things in the Caribbean, places in the Caribbean like Turks and Caicos or Scottish beaches. I've been on, not really warm enough to swim on, but beaches that just are epic in grandeur and uh, mystery. Has like that sense of mystery where you look out on the water and you just feel like there's some sort of either ghost ship out there or a monster or something really cool
The
happening.
monster with tiny heads and big eyes, like you talked about in your boat story, perhaps?
That's right. That's a good callback. Yes, the monsters with the tiny heads and the big eyes, or I don't know, all sorts of creatures out there, mermaids and mermen and
Sirens.
various creatures. What?
Sirens?
Sirens, all sort of beasties. I mean, I feel like the ocean is so deep and vast that who knows what lies out there, what creatures lurk. But oddly enough,
Nessie.
I'm not telling a sea monster story today.
All right. Well, you love a good sea monster story, so maybe for another day. We definitely should talk about Loch Ness. I love her.
Right,
R.I.P.
we should. Did I tell you that I went swimming in Loch Ness?
No.
It was a brief swim. It probably doesn't even classify as a swim, but we're just gonna go with that. But I did go out in the water at Loch Ness. It was very cold, and it was, even though I'm not too concerned about getting eaten by Nessie, there was this moment of becoming aware of the unknown, becoming aware of suddenly you're willfully stepping into something that part of you is just like, what's behind this, what is
Mm-hmm.
this, and that's kind of cool.
Well, it's like when you're a kid and you play those games where they like put spaghetti in a box and you have to put your hand in it, but you can't see what's in it, and you have to say like it's brains.
Right. Did they I mean, I know what you're talking about. It was like old, like cheesy but fun haunted houses.
Yeah, yeah,
They would
yeah.
do peeled grapes as like the eyeballs and whatnot.
Yes.
I there was a TV show on Sci-Fi. This might be too much of a tangent. There was a TV show on Sci-Fi that I briefly kind of crossed paths with, where that was the whole thing, where you would go feel stuff in tanks like snakes or rodents or whatever. And I went through it, and it was cool because I was guessing everything that you're supposed to guess what was in the tanks. And they're like, you didn't seem too freaked out by any of that, and I kind of felt like saying, you're talking to the guy that chooses to walk into dark places and ask if there's any ghosts in there.
Yep.
Anyhow, that said, that's a long-winded setup to beaches, and I'm curious, what did I don't know how we chose this, but what was sort of the tale that you decided to pursue for this one?
So for my story today, Aaron threw me a little bit for a loop by claiming the true crime story, normally my go-to. So I am going with a ghost story, but I'm doing my own spin on it by doing a ghosty love story. How do you
That's
like
very
that?
lovely. I like it a lot.
Lovely.
I love sweet ghost stories.
Yeah. And this is actually a beach that you probably know and well love because it's the St. Petersburg beach in Florida.
Okay.
So I got most of my sources from the Naples Daily News, an article by Tom Williams, Tampa Bay News by Tiffany Rosano, and then a book called Ghost Hunting Florida by Dave Lapham. And I am doing the story of the beach outside of the Don CeSar Hotel, also known as the Pink Lady or the Pink Palace, the gorgeous hotel on the St. Petersburg beach. So my story starts with Thomas Rowe. He was a Massachusetts man who in 1893 was in school in London. And he, as you know, any college student does, got really into the opera scene.
Naturally.
Naturally. So one night he was attending the Martina Opera and fell deeply in love with the woman who played the title character, a stunning brunette woman named Lucinda de Guzman. He ran outside to meet her after the performance, as you do, and just instantly fell in love, and she equally fell in love with him, and they started this whole secret relationship. They would see each other on the down low. They would sneak away to this fountain in the middle of town where they could meet each other privately. But Lucinda was Spanish nobility. And when her family found out that they were starting to talk of eloping, they moved Lucinda back to Spain. Obviously, Thomas was heartbroken. He wrote to her in Spain for years, but she was never given the letters. And then she died young, and she never knew that he kept looking for her. And on her deathbed, she actually wrote him a note that said, "Tom, my beloved Don CeSar." Don CeSar was the love interest of Martina in the opera, so that's what they nicknamed each other. She says, "Forgive them both as I have," meaning her parents. "Never would I despair, nor could I forsake you. We found each other before, and we will do so again. This life is only an intermediate. I leave it without regret and travel to a place where the swing of the pendulum does not bring pain. Time is infinite. I will wait for you by our fountain to share our timeless love. Destiny is time." I mean, isn't that so beautiful?
I mean, I wish I could write a letter that poignant and strong and romantic, as opposed to like, "Miss you lots."
You up?
Yeah, you up. Yeah, I would write that in a letter. Yes, that's classic, classic letter writing.
I once, when I was living in Chicago, had a neighbor text me asking if I had any cheese, I think. Like, clearly was like, "Let me hit you up to come over." I was like, "No, I don't have cheese and I'm not sleeping with you."
Wow.
So
dairy products as a booty call. That's a new one to me.
exactly. So I would much rather get this letter. It was given to Thomas. At this point in his life, he had moved to Florida and kind of begrudgingly married this woman. He did not want to marry her. He loved Lucinda. He did not care for this woman, but he did what you had to do in the 1920s, and he married someone. When he got this letter, he of course was devastated, and he decided to construct a hotel for Lucinda. So in 1925, the Don CeSar Hotel was built, of course, in the title of the main love interest in the Maritana opera. In it, he built an exact replica of the fountain where they would secretly meet. So sweet. And they said he would walk by it every single day in his signature Panama hat of the time, and just kind of look at it wistfully. He did eventually pass away in 1940, and left the hotel to his estranged wife, who was really terrible at managing the hotel. And of course, it eventually fell into disrepair. It changed hands a few times, but most interestingly was the United States Army Air Corps Convalescent Center, which is pretty interesting. But in 1972, it underwent a multi-million-dollar restoration and is now one of the top hotels on St. Petersburg Beach. But now this brings us to the spooky point of the story, as much as I would love to just tell you guys a sweet love story. One night, a front desk clerk was finishing her shift and decided to walk along the beach and enjoy the sunset. But she wasn't alone on the beach. As she's walking along the waterline, she looks up and saw a man also walking in front of her. But she noticed him because he looked super out of place. He was wearing a really old-fashioned suit, had a cane, and a Panama hat, which was Thomas's signature look. She looked to kind of see around the area if anyone else saw what she saw. But of course, when she turned back around, he was gone. Another guest staying said they saw a young couple walking on the beach at sunset, hand in hand, and they also stood out. because he was wearing a traditional like white suit, the kind of like tropical white linen-y suits you see, and a Panama hat. And the woman had long dark hair and was wearing a Spanish style peasant dress. So again, standing out because they aren't wearing traditional clothing. And then they disappeared as the sun started to set and the light shifted. So those are two of the stories. There are a few others. The hotel was actually really famous for baseball players. When baseball was kind of coming up and around in Florida, that's where they would all stay. So there's rumors that certain ghosty baseball players have been walking the grounds. Also army men, since it was where the army had been stationed for a while. But I love to think of these two lovebirds having found themselves together in the afterlife. And Deborah Freetham is a storyteller in the St. Petersburg area, and this story is like one of her favorite to tell. And Aaron kind of talked about this before, but most ghost stories are sad, and people died in tough ways or, had hard lives. But these were two people that couldn't be together in this life, and so they found themselves in their second life, and now they're together, and it's like an energy of joy and happiness in the hotel because they were finally reunited.
Well, there's a lot of happy, well, sweet, heartwarming ghost stories out there, and so many of them connected to love stories, lost loves, or separated loves, things like that. And it really, I think it says something about our desire to look. We love a good romantic story, and there is something sweet about the idea that even if you can't quite figure it out in life in this form, that maybe in the next life you can sort of have another go at it. I also should say that Thomas's wardrobe is on point. It sounds like something I would wear.
Totally.
I do not. I do have a Panama hat, which I wear, but I don't have a white linen suit.
You gotta
However,
get one.
oh, I so frequently think about purchasing one. However, I will say, not to discredit the story, but in Florida, pretty much any time of the year, you're going to find someone wearing a linen suit and a Panama hat. That's just sort of a almost like a de facto outfit for some people. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not a ghost moving about. It just means that that's not really as out of date of a wardrobe choice, at least not down in Florida.
In Florida, true.
Yeah, but no, it is a sweet, heartwarming story, and at least it's also not one where Thomas was like a dick or something. Where there's some ghost stories where the man sets about having some sort of challenge, like stay out on this roof during the coldest night of the year, and then you will prove your true love to me. And of course, she freezes and dies, and he feels terrible because he didn't think she'd actually do it. That's a story out of New Orleans. That kind of thing happens a lot. So this is at least kind of sweet.
It's so sweet, and they found each other, and God, it's what we all hope for, you know?
Is someone in possession of this letter?
That's a good question. I don't know.
They just know that the text of the letter was discovered?
They know the text of the letter, yes.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be interesting to find out. And
Yeah.
and then it should be taught in schools as far as how to write a damn fine love letter to your lost love.
Yeah.
So I like that. Well, that was such a sweet story that I feel like you should have gone second, because mine is a downer and terrible and gruesome. So
it's right up
buckle
my
in,
alley.
folks. Yeah, it is right up your alley. I think you'll like this one. So have you heard of the Lady of the Dunes?
Is she in Michigan?
She is not in Michigan.
Okay, then no.
Well,
I
at
only
least
know
at
of
least
one in Michigan.
this one is not. Maybe there is another one. But so this story goes back to 1974. It was July 26, 1974, in the Race Point Dunes in Provincetown, Massachusetts. Different in state. Now, it would seem that this was an overall cool, summer. It was definitely a cold day. It was around 65 degrees to maybe 70 degrees Fahrenheit, but it had been a pretty cool stretch. A young girl of around 12 years old was outside. She was following a family friend's dog, and the dog caught scent of something, ran into the dunes, and the young girl followed the trail of this dog. And that trail led to the naked, decomposing body of a woman. And this is the story of the Lady of the Dunes. She was face down. She was laying atop half of a green beach blanket. Under her head was a pair of Wrangler jeans and a blue bandana. I believe they were folded underneath her head. And her toenails were painted pink. This is just an odd little detail, but one of the details where there's so many details missing. She had expensive dental work, which was described as the New York style because they were all very expensive, but gold crowns that were between $5,000 and $10,000. However, several of those teeth were missing. Also missing were her hands. The cause of her death was homicide by blunt force trauma to the head with an instrument that was similar to a military entrenching tool, which is like a sharp shovel, a folding shovel. Her head was nearly decapitated by the tool as well, and she did appear to have been sexually assaulted after her death. Another odd detail out of many is that piles of pine needles had been set in the sand in place of her hands.
What?
Yeah, it's weird. So she could have been as young as 20 years old or as old as 49 years old. Was likely probably between 25 and 35 years old. Her hair was auburn or reddish color. It was tied in a ponytail with a kind of a glittery elastic band. She was around 145 pounds, pretty athletic build, and about 5'6". Now, I mentioned she could have been as young as 20 or as old as 49. Keep in mind, this area in the dunes, because of insects and weather, and the fact that she may have been out there between 10 days up to 3 weeks, she was badly decomposed.
Yeah.
She was found about 5 yards away from a local access road, and there were 2 sets of footprints leading to the sand. However, there was no sign of struggle. There were tire tracks nearby. There was no alcohol or drugs in her system. It was theorized she may have been murdered while sleeping, as if she was lying next to someone on the other side of that sheet. Missing persons reports, nothing. Yielded nothing. There was nothing from the dental records that yielded anything. There were some leads as far as a Maryland woman suspected the woman was her sister, and this woman said that they had lost touch when the sister moved to nearby Boston sometime before the murder. This didn't seem to go anywhere, and in my research I couldn't quite figure out what had happened to that one. And this is a story that's been written about multiple outlets. Medium.com did a pretty good recent breakdown on it, but every newspaper, especially in the New England area, had talked about this. In 1987, a Canadian woman told police that she had visited Provincetown when she was 5 years old and saw her father strangle a woman, which is so weird. Now, it's just such a frustrating detail because apparently there was some sort of a delay. I don't know whether it was between the Canadian police and then the Massachusetts police, but there was some sort of delay following up on this. And in the meanwhile, the lead went cold and the woman just disappeared. Not disappeared, but it moved away, fallen off the radar.
Yeah, wasn't able to get in touch with.
Yeah. There was a time when authorities thought the woman was an escaped drug dealer and bank robber whose name was Rory Jean Kessinger, but the DNA didn't match up. There was a murderer / cannibal who is now in prison, who confessed to the murder while he was in prison. However, his confession was doubted due to paranoid schizophrenia, and he also was saying things like, I killed her. He confessed it in a letter, and then he also confessed it elsewhere. But I'm not gonna tell the police or tell the guards because they roughed me up while I was in prison. But it was highly doubted. Something that seemed a little bit more possible was mob boss Whitey Bulger was a suspect because he was seen in the Provincetown area and he was seen with a woman that was similar looking around the same time. He was known for frequenting a local bar in the area, and he was also known for trying to to erase identifying marks on victims such as teeth, hands. He was killed in prison in 2018, which was not too long ago.
No, it was super recent. It was actually shortly after Black Mass came out, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't know for
I don't,
certain, but that
they weren't
probably sounds
related,
about
of
right.
course, but
So all of this is weird. This is a really tragic story. This woman, 46 years, dead, no identity, just somehow no one's come forward to really give a legitimate claim. So in 2015, now Jaws is one of my favorite movies. It's one of my movies that I watch all the time, certainly during the summer. If it's on TV, I stop and I watch it, and I'm not alone. That movie was filming in the area, not Provincetown, but in Martha's Vineyard, in 1974, and it was filming between May to October of that year. Now, in 2015, author Joe Hill, who you know as the creator of Lock and Key, which is a show out on Netflix right now, and a great series of graphic novels, and also the author behind Nosferatu and a bunch of other books. He's a really great author and big fan of his.
yeah.
He also happens to be the son of Stephen King.
Lock and
So,
Key was great. We watched it together.
yeah, it was. I didn't finish it though.
Neither did I.
So Joe Hill, also a fan of Jaws. 2015, he's rewatching Jaws. Shortly after reading a book about cold cases called The Skeleton Crew. About 54 minutes into the movie, there's a scene. You have seen Jaws, correct?
I have seen Jaws, and now I am realizing that I know this story.
Okay.
Because
well,
she... Okay.
Well, there's a scene about 54 minutes into the movie where the crowd is arriving to Amity Island for the 4th of July weekend. So they obviously filmed a crowd of extras. In fact, it was pretty terrible filming conditions because it was also cold during this time. We know the crowded beach scenes were at least partially being shot on June 21st. So Hill is rewatching this and he notices a woman who looks similar to what the Lady of the Dunes may have looked like, wearing a blue bandana and jeans. Maybe not a Wrangler pair of jeans, but a similar build. Now, again, because the bad decomposition of that body, it's hard to say precisely what she looks like. There's been some reconstruction showing throughout the years, in fact, and also so her body was exhumed at least twice. But Joe Hill sees a woman that appears to look very similar to the Lady of the Dunes. And, yeah, just to repeat, Jaws filmed from May to October that year in Martha's Vineyard. That's about 100 miles away from Provincetown. And it's not entirely out of the realm of the possible. This was a big movie being filmed there. It was a big deal. Not out of the realm of possibility that a woman would travel from 100 miles away to go check out the celebrities and the filming that's happening there. And an Entertainment Weekly reporter tried to pursue this story, but found that Universal Studios couldn't find the extra's name in their records, and also the casting director for Jaws died in 2009. Now, Hill wrote about it on a Tumblr page that's, I believe, defunct now. His story kind of kicked off a new wave of interest and really became a viral story. Esquire wrote about it. I've read so many different accounts on it. Esquire did a good piece on it. Now, it's an eerie thought that one of the first blockbuster, arguably, and one of the biggest movies in pop culture may have caught this woman as an extra, this woman that remains a mystery. And Hill, to quote him directly, said, quote, "It is a hell of a what if, isn't it? What if the young murder victim no one has ever been able to identify has been seen by hundreds of millions of people in a beloved summer classic, and they didn't even know they were looking at her? What if the ghost of the Lady of the Dunes haunts Jaws?" And not only Jaws, she haunts the family of the young girl that discovered the body. And the sister, whose name is Alyssa Metcalf, said that it always stayed with our family. It's like this kinship with this case. And 46 years later, it remains unsolved, and the Lady of the Dunes is buried in St. Peter's Cemetery in Provincetown, Massachusetts.
Wow.
Violent, eerie, spooky, kind of all together and connected to pop culture.
Yeah.
So you had heard of this one then?
I have. What reminded me is that she was an extra in Jaws. That I have heard before.
Possibly.
Maybe My Favorite Murder did the story on it. Someone did.
So possibly. I mean, one never knows whether it's. I mean, it's also worth pointing out that in the mid 70s, bandana and jeans, maybe not the most unusual
Yeah.
outfit.
Totally.
So it's, one can't say for certain. And even as far as Joe Hill's thing, he admits, hey, look, I'm a storyteller. My brain goes into these dark places and comes up with odd stories. That's my job. And he was willing to accept this just might be crazy. However, there were people, including some detectives, that said, look, cases have been cracked with odd pieces of information that can just send you on a whole other path. So I don't know. It is sad and strange that this woman just avoided any kind of identification. Not just her murderer, but her murderer, who may very well still be out there 46 years later.
Totally. May have even been another extra on the show.
I mean, I guess we can't say 100% not the case, but I mean, one never knows.
You
One
never
never
know.
knows.
I mean, there was a serial killer on the set of, what was it? Poltergeist? Rosemary's Baby? One of the famous ones, there's a serial killer who plays a doctor.
I don't recall that.
Maybe it was Poltergeist. He was like the extra doctor. Anyway, we could do a mini-sode episode on it.
We probably could. I mean, there are certainly, I've talked at length in the past about supposed curses and things that are attached to movie productions. A lot of it ends up being just coincidence and occasionally negligence and mismanagement on set, but there are also some pretty eerie things connected with those. So what's your take on this story? Is that, I mean, you're more of the true crime pro. Was that a good true crime story? Well, not good, but a
Yeah, I'd be
compelling.
curious, like, what police would have to say. I'd be curious, like, who any suspects were. Yeah, it's fascinating. The needles for hands, like the pine needles for hands. I mean, you bring up Whitey Bulger, that feels very likely if she maybe had a scar or maybe she was missing a finger. Like, that is something he could do to hide any sort of evidence. He did dump bodies frequently along beaches, so that also could be. Yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah, and you can look up copies of the police report out there, and there's a lot that's been written on this. Again, like Joe Hill really brought this into the forefront in 2005 is when I first heard about it. And then every couple of years it jumps back into the pop culture awareness. I mean, it's also one of the very few unsolved murders in that area, so it continues to plague the area, and that the case remains open. So it's one that is indeed creepy.
Mm-hmm.
However, also gruesome and violent, and it is a human life that was
Mm-hmm.
snuffed out. And for me, I was thinking like maybe we could do like a palate cleanser after that one. What do you say to that?
I love it. I think that's an excellent idea.
Well, I'm glad you agree. It's almost like we discussed this beforehand. I on that note, like I said, I am a fan of Joe Hill's work, and through the course of my work as a journalist and researcher, and also, writer of paranormal things, I've interviewed him on a couple occasions, and at one point, he told me a ghost story. So this is not set on beaches, so we're breaking the rules a little bit, but it's a Joe Hill ghost story of sorts, sort of. So, and it's a place that I'm actually familiar with and have stayed at. So I'm going to go ahead and play Joe Hill's response when I asked him about his own ghost story, if he had ever encountered a ghost.
I found a bed and breakfast in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. I forget the name of it. You could probably find it online. There's a bed and breakfast in Bethlehem that it's in an old building, and they offer they claim to be haunted by several ghosts, and they offer a package deal called Room with a Boo. And what it is you get to stay in room. You pay extra, and you get to stay in room 932, which is the haunted room. And if you're lucky, hopefully you'll have your sleep disturbed by a haunting. And I got pretty excited. I thought, oh, this is great. And I called up, and I couldn't get the Room with a Boo. It was already booked, but I could get the room right under it. So I got room 832. And then I'm calling my parents. I'm calling jokes. I'm like, oh, what happens if I die of fright? Do you think they still charge my credit card if I die of fright in the middle of the night? And I was, yucking it up. I got to the place. Love Bethlehem. It's a great town. It's a beautiful old hotel. And Elf was a little odd. It's kind of irregularly shaped. It's not. It has funny corners in it. And I went to sleep. I felt very easy in my mind. And at 2 a.m, I woke up feeling more terrified than I'd ever felt in my life over anything. I was just, it's like all the cliches. I was paralyzed with it. I felt certain there was someone in the room with me at the end of the bed. And I couldn't lift my head to look at him. I was too scared. And I was only half awake. I don't know what I was dreaming about or anything, but I remember I screamed, "Go away!" as loud as I could. And upstairs in the room above me, the Room with the Boo, I heard someone shout, and I heard stuff crashing over. I managed to scare myself. But not only did I manage to scare myself, I managed to give the people in the Room with the Boo the experience they were hoping for. Because when I screamed my head off, I definitely managed to frighten them, and you could hear them just about pissing themselves upstairs. So I feel like I helped the hotel out there.
So that's Joe Hill's ghost story from the Bethlehem Hotel. I stayed at this hotel. I actually lived down the street from it as well, and you would constantly talk to people that believed that there was things happening in this hotel. But what I especially love about this ghost story is the idea of like there's supposed haunted rooms in hotels or whatever, but that's only rules that we apply to it, saying this is the haunted room. There's nothing saying that the ghost can't just like pop down to the room below or across the hall or whatever. And the fact that he had some weird happening, and yet the people that paid extra for it, well, I guess they thought they had something, but they didn't really.
That's my favorite part, is that they thought they had something extra happening, but it was really just the person downstairs like screaming at his own ghost that he did not pay extra for.
And they'll go forward, that couple, hopefully they'll hear this, but if they, they'll go forward retelling this story about the time that it was totally worth it, that they spent the money for the Room with a Boo. Have you ever actively like stayed in a haunted room?
No, but I want to so bad. I also would like to stay in a hotel in a room with a boo.
a room with a boot.
Get it?
Yes. I mean, I do like the wordplay. I have. I mean, obviously, I've stayed in a lot of rooms that are called the haunted room, but a lot of times, any weird stuff that happens to me is the places that you're not expecting it, that are not the quote unquote haunted rooms. But yeah,
Yeah,
so
like your ship. The ship that you stayed on in the Queen Mary.
yeah, well, the whole ship of the Queen Mary is supposedly
Mm-hmm.
haunted, so it's all over the place. But yeah, I mean, I've stayed in some really nice rooms that were supposed to be haunted, but I still had a lovely night's sleep, which is good too because sleep's important. I will oftentimes probably take sleep over a ghost interrupting my sleep.
Yeah, me too.
So so yeah, thanks to Joe Hill for
Yeah,
that
that's
story.
fantastic.
I think NightMerica thanks you for both
Absolutely.
your observation skills with the Lady of the Dunes and for your ghost tale. That said, I think we covered some ground here with some. I mean, obviously, there's a lot more weird things happening on beaches. A lot of ghost stories on beaches, and a lot of true crime on beaches. This could be a whole focus of an entire show, or multiple episodes beyond this. But what'd you think?
Yeah, I mean, doing research for this show, there's so many stories that popped up along beaches. And when Aaron told me that he had a true crime story on a beach, of course, I first think, like, oh, is it the Somerton man? No. Oh, is it the children in Australia that went missing on the beach? No. It's like just the first things that come to your mind, or there's so many different options. So, yeah, I feel like we could definitely do this again. And if you, our listeners, have any personal stories, you can email them to us at nightmericashow@gmail.com.
Excellent. And yeah, and don't forget to, well, if you haven't already, hit the little subscribe and leave a review, leave a rating, share this with your friends, your family, your loved ones, even an enemy. It's a good time to share a podcast with your enemy.
It
Make
is.
amends.
In quarantine, we need stuff to keep us happy, and we've got exciting news. We found out this morning that we are on iHeartRadio now. We're on Stitcher, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, over literally wherever you want to listen. We're there. We are where you want us to be.
And hopefully that's and obviously you found us somewhere, so thanks for finding us.
Thank you.
So look, wherever you found us, we hope we find you right back here for another episode of NightMerica. We're gonna keep it weird, and we want you to be weird with us. So see you next time.